Amy Nathan, author of this great book. And the book is available online again.
Oh yeah, it's Amazon.com.
Amazon.com.
Yeah, they have copies
Bookstores
of it
here?
at the Morgan
On Morgan
bookstore.
State,
Yeah,
Morgan State University campus, where you were yesterday. There are copies there as well.
They have it there. Yeah, I think Ivy Books might have copies, but it's available at Amazon.com.
Yes, ma'am. Talk about
and also
go ahead,
the publisher. For all you teachers out there, the publisher has a special educators discount if you want to get copies for your class.
Right. Now, this book, to your knowledge, it's not available or not yet available inside of the Baltimore City Public Schools system as maybe a course.
They do. Yeah. They bought a lot of copies. I think they have, and there's also copies that in Pratt system and in the Baltimore County Library system have copies. And I gave a program last summer at the AP Summer Academy, which is run by the Baltimore Public Schools for juniors who are going to be taking AP courses and senior. And they bought a copy for every student in the program last summer.
Excellent.
And I gave a program for social studies teachers in the Baltimore City Public Schools, and they bought a copy of the book for every one of the social studies teachers who took part. So it's beginning to make its way into the Baltimore City Public Schools.
Yes, ma'am. Talk about, again, with the desegregation of Gwynn Oak Park and how that was one event or movement that was tied to, as you've talked about, again, moving downtown to work toward breaking down, of course, Jim Crow or segregation in department stores where blacks were not allowed to go, stores such as Woolworth, Reed's drugstores, and other drugstores as well. But also just help them to claim their humanity, but also in terms of those who wanted to join the movement to claim their humanity as well, and then use that, as you said, as where do we go from here with the March on Washington, but continuing the work after the Great March on Washington.
Well, the whole thrust of this story is that it was young people who led the way, young people who prodded older people to actually get involved. And Morgan State College students were prime movers. So I point that out, in following the story along, I point out that Morgan State College students kept moving the intensity of the protests a little farther up, and that led eventually to these massive protests at Gwynn Oak in July of '63. But the big step that really made a big impression of the Morgan had been students had been protesting against discrimination at the shopping center that was very near Morgan campus, the Northwood Shopping Center, and they'd been having different kinds of sit-ins there, and particularly at the restaurants at the Heck Company that was there at Northwood, and there was a court injunction against them having more than like two picketers at a time, and so the NAACP provided money to provide buses to take the Morgan students downtown in the spring of 1960 and picket outside the restaurants at the flagship stores of Hutzler's, Hoschel's, Heck Company downtown. And this was in the height of Easter shopping season. They didn't want to have disruption and there was a lot of white support for the Morgan students. White customers threatening to cancel their charge accounts. People putting pressure on the department stores, and the department stores agreed to end segregation at the restaurants the department stores. So this was because of the Morgan students taking the bold move of moving downtown, getting press coverage, getting sort of upping the level of the protest. And that made a big impression on following up with the restaurant sit-ins that Morgan and CORE did together around the state of Maryland, and then the Morgan protests at the Northwood Theater, and that all set the stage for the Gwynn Oak protests of July, where they realized that in order to get the attention of the community and of the press, you had to be a little bit more assertive.
That's right. Yes. Talk about how, I think, because oftentimes we hear of the men, but talk about some of the women, and as you just mentioned, the young people, but particularly the women, because they were very instrumental part of the movement, an instrumental part of the organizing and the organizations back then.
Yes, in Baltimore particularly, women played a big role. Juanita Jackson Mitchell was the one who got it all started in 1931. She and her sister, with the help of her mother, who then became the head of the NAACP for 35 years, William May Carroll Jackson. Verda Welcome was the first African-American woman elected to a state legislature, and she was, there's pictures of her in the book, and she was very important. Her daughter, Mary Sue Welcome, who's now is one of the Maryland Assistant Attorney Generals, she was arrested in 1960 along with Judge Robert Bell,
who's retiring next month.
Yeah,
That's right.
As 16-year-olds, they were arrested. Yes. I don't want to reveal her age. People can do the math. But she was arrested in 1960 for at a sit-in at the old Hooper's restaurant. And yes, there were Carolyn Stith. Fortunately, she died too early. She's another one of these people who died too young. But people who I interviewed for the book talked about her. She was a very important leader in the civil rights movement. So Baltimore comes out pretty good in having women being important in the movement.
Right. And of course, as you are continuing this work and this project, as you've been working on the book, you're still, of course, interested in anybody that wants to come forward and tell their story, share their story, because I find that oftentimes what happens is this is, again, kind of a reawakening for many, recommitment for many, redeeming for many, reclaiming for many, because for some it was a sense of shame, not just for the whites, but also for blacks in terms of not being able to gain access into these public facilities that became of a badge of honor for some, but a badge of shame for others. And I think being able to tell their story is what allows them to lift that callous, if they would, that they feel like they've been carrying around the segregation in Baltimore City, around Gwynn Oak Park, around the department stores downtown. Talk about the importance of those that want to come forward and share their stories now.
Well, yesterday at the screening of Pete O'Neill's new documentary, he made the point that he's going to continue on. He wants to record anyone who wants to come forward. He's got the camera, he's got the tape, and he's going to record their stories. So I think his email is cameraman Pete.
Yeah, we'll look into it, make sure we get it right.
Find him out. If you got a story to tell, contact him. I have a feeling that he's going to be making more documentaries.
That's right.
Over and over. And people came forward at in the discussion section to stand up and say, I did this, I did that, I remember this.
Right.
I remember. And these are stories not to forget. I also have in the workshop that I gave for the social studies teachers, I really encouraged them to get their students involved in going to community members. Anyone over the age of about 60 will have some sort of memory about this. Had the students interview them, and so we had the teachers at the workshop that I gave. They did beginning of oral history interviews with 3 people who were involved, and the Maryland Historical Society is interested in getting these stories. So, Darren, you'll put my email address on. Yeah, people contact me. We'd like to get these stories before it's too late.
That's right. And talk about, and we'll come back to the line, take more of your calls, 410-761-1592. And talk about the importance, I think, of giving this history to our young people, because even for those that say, well, Gwynn Oak Park, it was a racist, segregated park where we couldn't go. But it's not the focus on the negative, but focus on the positive, which helped to change Gwynn Oak Park. But now, as I said, that when our children think of parks, they're thinking about theme parks, King's Dominion, which really they have no connection to. They're thinking about, some of these other Six Flags, where here you're talking about places where you could actually go, and it had more of homegrown community, flavor to it. Talk about some of the other maybe lesser known parks that were here in Maryland, like Glen Echo Park and others may not be familiar with.
Glen Echo Park was down in a suburb of Washington, and it also has a famous merry-go-round there. That's all that's left of the park there is the merry-go-round, and it was Howard students had a protest there in 1960. Yeah. They mounted their protest differently than the people in Baltimore did, in that they had large support of the surrounding white community. And
Right.
once the Howard students started the protests, people protested every day, kept the protests going that whole entire summer, and members of Congress came and
That's right.
joined the picket line. They got the Montgomery County Recreation Department to cancel holding swimming lessons at the amusement park, and by the next year, the owners had agreed to end segregation there. But then they instituted something that then, in a way, was a filter.
Yes.
By having an admissions fee.
Right.
Which these parks didn't have before.
That's
and
right.
Then the park closed by 68.
Mm-hmm.
And Gwynn Oak Amusement Park closed by 72. It had financial difficulties. It wasn't the total financial difficulty that the owners predicted, but many white customers did, in fact, stop coming.
Right.
And they had financial difficulties, but what really did them in was Hurricane Agnes, which I gather rivals Hurricane Sandy for the flooding that it
Right.
caused.
That's right.
Such damage that the park closed in 72 and never reopened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me come back to the line, take a few more calls, then I'm going to ask your thoughts and comments on traditions in Baltimore City. This used to be a city full of traditions for blacks, brown, red, yellow, and white, and it seems that our children are robbed of those traditions today when you see things such as the city fair and other kind of traditions that are no longer here in the city of Baltimore, and perhaps even in this country, that seems to be kind of just, not available to our young people, which was available to previous generations. But let me come to the lines, 410-761-1592, and you can get in on the conversation. Good afternoon, caller. You're on the State of the City.
How you doing, Darren?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
This is Brother John.
Yes, sir.
Look here, this lady, was she writing a book about African American peoples?
No, she's right. She wrote a book about, again, Gwynn Oak Park. It's not about just African Americans, but it's about black, brown, red, yellow, and white in terms of, again, working to desegregate Gwynn Oak Park is what the book was about.
Something about Gwynn Oak Park.
Mm-hmm.
Back when we was a kid, my mama and them right up across from the park wanted to buy a home.
Right.
It was so racist and prejudiced. No, you couldn't buy that.
Mm-hmm.
And when they had the little furry thing up in there, then so many blacks started coming.
Right.
Then the white people started moving out.
Yes, sir.
So that's what we got in. But this Jim Crow racist stuff.
Right.
And this lady, how old are she?
Oh, you're supposed to ask a lady that question? No, I graduated from high school in 1963, so
Okay, but
you figure that
you're
out.
writing about something. The civil rights marches I was in. I marched with Dr. King through Selma and all that stuff. I done seen George Washington O'Connor.
Right.
I know about the racist prejudice in Baltimore City.
Right.
Idea. No white person can write about anything with that. You can run to tell me what one you mention them did and so them did. Look here. I was into the mix of this here. You know, I was sitting here listening to you, so I got to call in.
Well, yes, sir.
What you doing? Drop it.
Okay.
Hey, drop it right about what the white people did.
Yeah.
The racist, the prejudice, what they did. You understand me? You always coming over to the black side. I'm going to write about this. I heard that Mitch Juanita, Mitch, and all this type of stuff. You don't know what's going on. You just want to write and sell something about the black community. Thank you and have a blessed day.
All right. Thank you, Brother John. Well, I think when you read the book, it's not, again, just limited to just the black community. And I think that's important. But I thank you, brother, for your call. But nevertheless, let's talk about the traditions, as I talked about, and our young people being able to have these traditions, I think, passed on to them and understand the importance of holding on to these traditions and passing that history on, the good as well as the bad.
Yeah, that's the whole point that I wrote the book,
Right.
which was to let young people know today that their own history, black and white in Baltimore.
That's right.
Because, I don't know, segregation didn't just affect black people.
That's right.
It crippled all of us.
That's right.
I mean, in no possible way was the experience that we as white people had in Baltimore in any way comparable. But as a young person growing up in Baltimore, there were so many things that didn't make sense. There were so many things that weren't talked about that I didn't know about until I started writing this book.
That's right.
And so I hope this book will be read by white and black alike to to learn what was really going on. And
That's right.
And it was. Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with the fact that I'm not a black person, so I can't write. Yeah, I mean that's just,
right.
I mean, I recognize that as a